Well, hello, it's Richard Pearce from Finextra TV, and delighted to be joined today by our old friend Marianne Haahr. Marianne is the Executive Director at the International Advisory Panel on Biodiversity Credits. Hey, Marianne, how are you?
Hey, hi Richard. Very well, thank you. Good
Well,
start to the year.
yeah, good start to the year. Pleasure to see you. So you kindly come on to talk for our Predict series for 2026. And obviously, with a title like that, you're going to talk about biodiversity credits. Tell us about your role and what the IAPB do.
Yeah, definitely. Very happy to. So I'm the Executive Director of the International Advisory Panel on Biodiversity Credits. So we are not for profit, but we were founded by government. So we were initiated by the UK and French government, and it was just in the aftermath of when the world came together to adopt the Kunming-Montreal Agreement on biodiversity and nature. And that has an article 19 that talks about innovative financing instruments. And to be specific, 19D talks about biodiversity credits as one tool in the toolbox that governments can use to arrive at the goals of the convention. So that's halting biodiversity loss by 2030 and creating nature positive countries by 2050. So we were launched by the British and the UK to basically create a global approach or global roadmap to really accelerate the launch of nature credit markets and scaling of them, but with high integrity at their core. So the idea was really to say, let's put out an entity that can catalyze these markets in a way so we don't repeat the mistakes that we built into the carbon credit markets, which were we over-focused on efficiency of market design to the detriment of integrity, especially in voluntary carbon markets. And we've seen really the results of that, which has been that prices have been really low, trust has been low. So what we want is to build high integrity nature credit markets. And I spent a lot of time talking to governments these days because governments are the ones that are putting out the regulated markets. Then there's, of course, voluntary markets, but we do believe that the biggest demand driver for finance into these markets is going to be regulation. So spent a lot of time talking to governments around the world.
Gotcha. Great. So for those that don't know, let's define biodiversity credits and, as you said, as distinct from carbon credits. What have you built in that will avoid those challenges and give us a sound foundation to get your predictions for 2026 set off on the right foot?
Yeah, no, definitely happy to. So a nature credit is basically, like you already said, Richard, it's a financial instrument to get finance to flow into nature. So what it is that basically you pay for a verified improvement of nature. So normally you pay for a hectare of improvement on a hectare of nature. So and that's over a 10, 20, or 30 years period. So it can be that you pay for afforestation on one hectare of deforested land, or rewilding in an area in a hectare of land that's been monocropped, or restoration of grasslands, one hectare of that. And you actually don't. It's just like with carbon credits. So you don't have a claim on the actual nature. So nature credit is not trading nature assets. It's not trading the trees in reforestation. It's not trading the underlying land. You actually pay for the effort that the land steward put in to create the nature improvement. So to plant the forest, etc. And then you can claim that as a company. You can put it in your disclosure report, for instance. So it's an intangible asset in that sense.
And it's sort of durable and additional, so
Yeah.
meaning these things are going to last a long time and so forth. Now, this high integrity piece, which is critical, can you tell us, with what you've said so far in your predictions for 2026, how is this going to get traction? How can we be sure the integrity is going to be in place? And this whole fungibility and so forth, all the challenges of the carbon market. What do you predict unfolding in 2026?
Well, so in 2026, I think what we're going to see, so we came out at COP30 in Belém with a global baseline where we mapped out all the nature credit policies and regulations around the world, and there are 19 in place. at the moment that are catalyzing quite significant finance into nature. So I definitely predict that we will see more jurisdictions, because there's no way you can finance your national implementation plan of the convention without nature credits and private finance. So we will see many more jurisdictions starting to put out in draft their regulation or their regulated nature credit markets. And they're going to build in high integrity, because we're going to support them to do that. And that's about that 80% of the stewards of biodiversity in the world are indigenous peoples. So I think those regulations are very clearly going to stipulate what type of benefit sharing is going to happen in these markets. So if you buy a nature credit, you can be sure that X percentage of that price go to those who actually create the nature uplift, right? But also that there is, like you say, additionality. It's nature that's not going to be financed by other means, or it's just going to happen because you leave a nature asset. And there's going to be transparency in registries, so you will be able to better understand what is priced in to the underlying pricing models, etc. So I think when we go to COP17 in Armenia in end of October of this year, there's going to be more than 19 countries that have these types of nature credit markets.
Wow. So you're basically saying, the discussions happened, the kind of milestones have been created, the hard work has been done. So really now you're seeing it moving into implementation and scale. Would you go as far as that?
I would go as far as that. There's a lot of piloting out there, but I think now what the market is ready for is beyond pilot. It's really taking it at the jurisdictional level. But I think what's going to be interesting and what's happening at the moment is that the leadership in these markets is changing, right? So we saw Brazil, they had the first transaction just before Belém. So these markets are designed very different per different jurisdictions, because different jurisdictions have different ecosystems. And in Brazil, for instance, under the forestry code, they have what they call a CRA unit. Basically, it is because a lot of the primary rainforest that's degraded in Brazil, it sits on private property. So it doesn't sit on government-owned land. So what Brazil has done to create their markets is that they've put an obligation on all those people that hold land with primary forest on it, and they give you a quota. So they say if you hold private land with primary forest on it that's been deforested or standing, a certain percentage you have to make sure is intact as forest for in perpetuity. So if you have a piece of land and you have less than that percentage, you have to buy from someone else a quota or a nature credit that has more. So that's one way of designing it in Brazil. Japan, it's a different way of designing a nature credit market. But what we definitely see is leadership shifting. So we have a lot of momentum in Southeast Asia and China, also in Latin America, but it's getting politically complex. And then, of course, the European Union coming out with their roadmap. But I'm expecting a lot to come out of Asia and Southeast Asia and China actually in 2026 of the sort of jurisdictional market design.
Absolutely amazing. Fantastic. So if people are listening to this, from sort of the retail through to the institutional and even the corporate, how do they get involved? How do they learn more? How do they actually participate?
Yeah, so I think one thing, if you are corporate and you've already done your TNFD disclosure and you know what is the nature flowing into your business model, what's your dependencies, water, pollination, etc., there are already credit developers and issuers out there. They may not offer them regulated, but voluntary. You can start to invest where you have the highest dependencies, so you can get involved today and just test it out, because that's going to be a good resilience driver for you. If you are a government, you can call me and my colleagues, because we launched what we call the policy coalition. So we are going into a sprint towards COP17 to really develop more standardization for governments to put into their regulatory design. You can also go on our webpage where we have a number of learning publications on what does the landscape look like, both from policy regulation, but also on the credit issuer side. We've done a number of learning studies on that. So some resources out there, but very happy to have conversations.
Fantastic. Well, we'll get the link from you and we'll post that in the text with the interview. Marianne, listen, fantastic, short and sweet, but it's a great progress of success. So we'll look forward to hearing from you maybe at the end of next year and find out how you got on. But for now, Marianne, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Richard, for having me. Have a good day.